It was the first part of the night. 90 kilometers north of Hyderabad, the small town of Mahakpur lay under the reign of a deep silence. Every now and then, the faint whistle of a distant train could be heard, as if some long-forgotten memory was softly knocking on the doors of stillness. Mud-built houses, a gentle mist draped over them, and the shadows of date palms. Together, they created a scene that hovered somewhere between a dream and reality. At the far edge of the village, a narrow wooden bridge crossed the river, the only way to reach the town. Near that very bridge, a faint yellowish glow flickered from a small hut. It was the light from Nawal's room. Nawal, a 24-year-old young widow, skin like fresh milk, long thick hair, and in her eyes that quiet sadness often reserved for those hardened too early by life's cruel storms. It had been 3 years since she lost her husband Rahil. That motorcycle accident, the cold hand of Rahil on the white hospital bed, and the tears that froze deep inside her heart, those memories now returned again and again in her dreams. Sometimes Rahil's voice would seem to drip from the leaking roof of the hut. At other times, his laughter would echo from the fields beyond, and Nawal would open her eyes with a jolt. Then she'd feel as if all that remained of life was a heavy silence and a mountain of responsibilities. After Rahil's passing, Nawal held onto a new thread of courage. She set up a small wooden stall in front of her home where, early in the morning, she sold parathas, tea, and Mehakpur's famous sweetwater chestnuts. Her flavors quickly became known across neighboring villages. Farmers, sugarcane juice laborers, even jeep drivers coming from the city, all became loyal fans of her tea. But it wasn't just the taste that drew them in. It was also the way Nawal kept her gaze lowered, her graceful movements, and that soft smile she wore while bidding every customer farewell. Still, Nawal lived within a veil, never making eye contact with anyone. She simply made tea, flipped parathas, and returned quietly to her hut at dusk. At the highest point of the town stood an old mansion, which locals referred to as the Old Fort. Long ago, Nawab Mehak Khan had ruled from there. But now the mansion was in the hands of his grandson, Dilshad Mehak. Dilshad, in his early 60s, was a dignified man, broad-shouldered, bearded and white, and carrying a commanding presence in his eyes. After graduating from a business school in the city, he returned to manage his ancestral lands, invested in 2 sugar mills, and grew close to local politicians. His wife had been taken by cancer a decade earlier. His children worked jobs in Dubai, visiting only once or twice a year. In the long corridors of the mansion, loneliness slithered like a silent snake. Often, Dilshad would gaze out the window at the mango orchards spread below, feeling as though laughter had been banned in this silent kingdom. One morning, Dilshad was traveling with his driver in his Jeep when the tire burst near the bridge. While the driver got to work fixing the puncture, Dilshad stepped out and dusted off his coat. That's when his eyes landed on a small stall across the road. The griddle sizzled loudly. Smoke curled upward, and there was Nawal leaning forward, flipping a paratha. Her veil-covered eyes sparkled through the steam rising from the pan. Dilshad's feet moved almost of their own accord toward the stall. He asked for a cup of tea. As Nawal handed him the cup, she softly asked, "More sugar or less?" It was the first time he had heard her voice. It was gentle, but carried the earthy warmth of soil after rain. Without thinking, the words slipped from Dilshad's lips. "Just the way you always make it." Nawal looked up in surprise, but quickly lowered her gaze again. She realized this man wasn't a regular customer. Perhaps it was his first visit. Even so, she didn't find it appropriate to say anything. In the following days, the Jeep began to stop near the bridge more often. Sometimes with an excuse, sometimes for a business errand. Dilshad would sit quietly on the wooden bench, sip his tea, while Nawal silently tended to her utensils. At first, people assumed it was nothing more than a wealthy landlord enjoying his cup of tea. But then the whispers began. Among the village elders, the sharpest tongue belonged to Bibi Hasina. One afternoon, she came to Nawal's stall and whispered in her ear, "Daughter, the gaze of a rich man can ruin a poor girl's fate. Be careful." Nawal lowered her eyes and softly replied, "I don't mix anything in my earnings, Auntie, but I can't control what people carry in their hearts." Hasina let out a deep sigh and walked away. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Dilshad's old housekeeper, Baba Nazir, finally gathered the courage to ask one evening, "Master, you've been going there every day lately. Is everything all right?" Dilshad answered with the faint smile. Nazir, some fragrances have a pull. When the heart follows a feeling, it becomes hard to return. Nazir understood some of it, and some he didn't. But he did notice that later that night, for the first time in years, Dilshad had the old harmonium in the abandoned music room repaired. He then sat under the dim courtyard light and softly played Rag Darbari. The melody echoed through the long corridors of the Haveli, as if someone was quietly trying to awaken a sleeping kingdom. Around the same time, Dilshad's nephew, Ayan, arrived from the city. He was 30 years old, modern, and an aggressively ambitious businessman. No sooner had he arrived than he laid out his plans. He needed storage space for a new sugar mill and suggested Dilshad sell the rear part of his orchard. Dilshad refused firmly. That orchard is a family heirloom. I can't sell it. Ayan, with veiled frustration, said, Uncle, the cure for loneliness lies in big business deals, not in marrying a village widow. What will that even give you? Dilshad's eyes flashed with anger. Don't treat everything like a transaction, and stay out of my personal life. Ayan clenched his jaw. He had already made up his mind. If that land slipped from his hands, his dream factory would never be built. Meanwhile, another turning point came in Nawal's life. A young man from the town, Mujahid, who often visited her stall, sent a marriage proposal through his mother. Nawal politely declined. Mujahid then folded his hands before her in the middle of the lane. Sister, I'll be your support for life, he pleaded. Nawal responded briefly, Right now, I'm still searching for support within myself. Mujahid felt deeply insulted, but somewhere inside a thought whispered, Maybe Nawal's heart is set on someone else. Soon, a rumor spread. Nawal had rejected the proposal because she was involved with a wealthy landlord. The air around her began to turn toxic. During those days, Nawal often reopened the windows of her past at night. She remembered her wedding when she was only 19. Rahil had been educated in the city, a bit mischievous by nature, but always tender with her. On the night of their nikah, Nawal's father lovingly told Rahil, Son, this girl is our precious jewel. Never treat her as a burden. Rahil had smiled and said, Babaji, she's the most precious gift of my life. But fate had other plans. Just 2 years into their marriage, the accident happened, and Nawal became a widow. Neither her in-laws stood by her, nor was anyone from her own family willing to take her in. So she made the decision to live alone in the hut, on her own strength. Even now, sometimes she'd wonder if that one breath hadn't stopped, how different her life might have been. But life was moving forward now, no matter how thorny the path. One night, as Nawal was closing up her stall, she noticed a white paper resting on the bench. It read, Meet me tomorrow evening near the old banyan tree by the river. D. Nawal's heart skipped a beat. There was no doubt about who D was. Dilshad. She couldn't sleep all night. The next afternoon, clouds suddenly gathered over the sky. The wooden planks of the bridge were old, and below, muddy water flowed sluggishly. Near the banyan tree, Dilshad was already waiting, holding a small clay box in his hands. Nawal greeted him from a distance. In a soft voice, Dilshad said, This is soil from Rahil's grave. I've heard you visit it every Thursday to place fresh earth. But the rains are coming soon, and you might not be able to go. Keep this. Nawal's tears spilled without warning. She took the box and held it close to her chest. For the first time, Dilshad reached out and gently placed his hand over the box. I understand your loneliness, he said quietly. Nawal lowered her eyes. Dilshad added slowly, I want to honor you. But there is a gap of age between us. In a calm, gentle voice, Nawal replied, It's not age that matters, it's intention. And with that, she turned and walked away. Hidden behind the bushes on the other side, Ayan was watching everything. His fists clenched with rage. This widow won't destroy my plans. I'll remove her from the path no matter what. That evening, Dilshad paced restlessly in his room. He pulled out an old framed photograph, one he had kept hidden in his closet for years. In the picture, a young Dilshad and Rahil sat beneath a dense tree, studying together during their university days. Rahil was smiling and Dilshad's eyes were serious. He thought, one day, I must tell Nawal that I was Rahil's friend. But fear stopped him. What if Nawal thought he was carefully plotting his way into her life? He needed more time. But time wasn't on his side. The poisonous whispers in the village were growing louder. Even the staff at the mansion and old Nazir had started hearing rumors that Dilshad was planning to marry Nawal. One day, with nervous hesitation, Nazir finally asked, "Master, people are talking. Is it true that you intend to marry her?" Dilshad took a deep breath and answered, "Yes, Nazir. If Nawal agrees, I plan to. I'm not afraid of anyone. I just want her to feel sure." Meanwhile, the flames of greed were roaring higher in Ayan's heart. He once again tried to pressure Dilshad. "Uncle, this marriage will complicate the inheritance. I'll go to court for my mother's share. I could even claim mental instability against you." Dilshad remained calm. "Do whatever you want. I've already taken care of every legal detail." On the other side, Nawal battled inner confusion. One night, Dilshad left a letter for her, quietly placing it on her stall's counter. "Nawal, if our paths have crossed by the will of God, then I fear nothing. I know you've been hurt before and you're afraid of betrayal, but I want to offer you respect and protection. The decision is yours. Dilshad Mihak." Nawal read the letter and sat in thought, her heart racing. Could she truly gather the courage to start a new life? 3 years of widowhood had scorched her soul. No one had ever offered help or shelter, except the one to whom she wept every night in prayer. A few days later, in a small gathering after the Asr prayer, Nawal was married to Dilshad in the presence of the mosque's imam and 2 witnesses. In the marriage contract, Nawal wrote just 4 words in the section for mahar, peace of heart. Alongside it, she requested a small, symbolic amount, only for formality. Lightning cracked across the village sky. Tongues grew sharper, gossip thicker, but in the mansion, lamps were lit for the first time in years. The old fort seemed to awaken. Servants lit lanterns along the corridors, canopies were raised at the entrance. For the first time in his life, Dilshad felt a joy that was entirely unrestrained. That night, Nawal stepped shyly into the bridal room for the first time. Dilshad welcomed her with a white sheet embroidered with red roses. He gently took her hand and said, "I regret taking so long to hold this hand, but now, I'll never let go." Nawal lowered her gaze. In her heart, a silent promise began to beat softly. Only a few days had passed since the wedding when Ayan launched his next move. He summoned 2 city reporters who published a sensational story. 60-year-old landlord tricks young widow and seizes inheritance. By evening, the headline was running across TV channels. Under Nawal's photo, the caption read, "Gold Digger of the Year." Nawal saw her image on the screen and trembled. Dilshad comforted her. "The truth will come out soon, but we must stay patient." But Ayan didn't stop there. He provoked Mujahid, the young man from the village who had once proposed to Nawal and still carried the sting of her refusal. Offering money and fueling jealousy, Ayan told him, "Smear Nawal's name, hurt Dilshad if you can." One night, Mujahid attacked Nawal's stall, shattering utensils and leaving behind a threatening letter. When Nawal told Dilshad, he was shaken with fury. He reported it to the police, but there wasn't enough direct evidence to act against Mujahid. Ayan then took it a step further. He filed a legal case in court claiming that Dilshad was mentally unstable and had been manipulated by Nawal into changing his will. In the preliminary hearing, the judge ordered a medical board to assess Dilshad's mental health at a leading city hospital. Dilshad calmly told Nawal, "Truth is my guardian. We have nothing to fear." Nawal placed her hand on the Quran and whispered a prayer. "Ya Rab, protect the dignity of the truth." On the day of the examination, a crowd of reporters had already set up camp outside the hospital. As soon as Dilshad and Nawal arrived, microphones were shoved into their faces. Someone shouted, "How much property has the new wife taken over?" Dilshad gave a short but firm reply. "No property was taken. Only respect was shared." Nawal's heart trembled, but her eyes sparkled with a newfound strength. The medical test results came back. Dilshad was perfectly sane. The only diagnosis, slightly high blood pressure. As the report was submitted in court, the judge scolded Ayan's lawyer harshly. "You've wasted the court's time with baseless accusations." Ayan had backed himself into a corner, yet he refused to surrender. As his final blow, he contacted a notorious local gangster, Gadi Shah. He struck a deal for 25 lakhs. The plan was simple. Either tamper with the brakes of Dilshad's vehicle or launch a direct assault. Nawal knew nothing of this scheme. She was focused on building her new life. Dilshad had advised her to stop working from the roadside stall. Instead, create a small cafe inside the mansion, he said. That way, you'll be safe. At first, Nawal hesitated. What will the villagers say? That I've started living in luxury behind palace walls. Dilshad gently reassured her. What matters most is your safety, not their opinions. Preparations for the cafe were underway. Then one night, Gadi Shah's men stormed the mansion. The courtyard was cloaked in darkness. Their hands held guns. Hatred dripped from their words. Dilshad shouted, "Who are you?" A voice responded from the shadows, "The rightful heirs of this land." And then, a gunshot. Bullets rained against the walls. Dilshad immediately realized this was no ordinary attack. It was part of a larger conspiracy. He rushed toward the old storage room where chemical barrels from the sugar mill were kept. The sharp sting of acid fumes burned his nostrils. Quickly, he lifted a wooden plank and jammed it behind the door to keep the intruders from entering. Meanwhile, Nawal was trapped in her room. Peeking through the door crack, she saw a shadow with a gun creeping toward her. In panic, she looked around and spotted a lantern hanging on the wall. With all her strength, she hurled it at the attacker's head. The glass shattered, oil spilled, and a flame erupted. The attacker screamed and stumbled back. The other men panicked. At that moment, sirens blared in the distance. The police were arriving. It was the postman, Anwar, the same one who once helped Nawal, who had informed the guards just in time. The attackers fled in fear. Only Gadi Shah, in a scuffle with Dilshad, was captured. At the police station, he confessed everything, that Ayan had ordered and funded the entire attack. By morning, Ayan was taken into custody. To the media, he cried foul, "My uncle framed me under his new wife's influence." But the police had hard proof, Gadi Shah's confession and call records. The case proceeded to court. For the first time, the village began to see Ayan's greedy face for what it was. Some of those who once doubted Nawal now avoided eye contact out of shame. Within 3 months, witness statements and evidence led to formal charges against Ayan. For the first time, true peace settled into the courtyard of the old fort. In that stillness, Nawal and Dilshad's hearts began to fill with a gentle, healing light. As mango season stretched its limbs in the orchard, Nawal officially opened her cafe inside the Haveli. She named it Rahat Cafe, a name that was, in a way, a blend of Rahil and Dilshad. For the inauguration, everyone from the village was invited. Even Bibi Hasina attended. Nawal smiled and asked, "Maji, are you happy today?" Hasina placed a warm hand on Nawal's head and replied, "My child, you endured every hardship without ever letting a sigh escape your lips. Your prayers built you a path filled with ease. I now believe God is indeed merciful." Barely 3 months had passed since that celebration when a jeep overturned near the primary school road. Locals rushed the injured driver to Rahat Cafe. Nawal gasped when she recognized him. It was Mujahid, the same man who once tried to harm her. He was soaked in blood, disoriented, unable to recognize anyone. Nawal didn't hesitate. She gave him water, treated his wounds, and offered first aid. Between sobs and broken breath, Mujahid looked up and whispered, "Sister, please forgive me. I've sinned. Ayan lured me with greed, and I was a fool." Nawal's eyes welled up. Standing beside her, Dilshad quietly watched the moment unfold. In silence, he reflected, sometimes the greatest victory lies in forgiving others. Nawal later announced that she would cover all of Mujahid's medical expenses. The news spread across the village, and with it, her respect grew even more. One morning, Nawal felt unusually exhausted. The village midwife examined her and smiled brightly. "Congratulations. Allah has blessed you with news of a child." Tears welled in Nawal's eyes. When Dilshad heard the news, he stood with his white beard damp from tears, raising his hands in gratitude. He arranged for a special meal at the mosque and offered heartfelt prayers that this joy may remain forever. Around that time, a wandering fakir came to the Haveli's outer gate. In his hands, he held a bundled cloth. The gatekeeper, Bano, asked, "Baba, do you need food?" The fakir replied, "This is an amanat. Deliver it to Dilshad Mahak." The bundle was untied. Inside was Rahil's old jacket, and in the pocket, a letter written in his own hand. My dearest friend Dilshad, if anything happens to me, take care of my wife. This jacket was a gift from her father to me. Now I pass it on to you. Nawal will need support. Let her consider your home as her own Wastan, Rahil. As Nawal read the letter, tears streamed down her face. Dilshad pressed the jacket to his chest, overwhelmed with emotion. In that moment, Nawal finally felt certain. Dilshad's intentions had always been pure. She whispered softly to him, "You've given me the greatest gift, respect." Dilshad wiped the corners of his eyes. "I've fulfilled my promise, and God has brought peace to my heart." When Ayan, locked away in jail, heard that his uncle was expecting a child, his jealousy exploded. One night, he bribed an old prison guard for a mobile phone and called the remaining members of Gadi Shah's gang. "Bring down the mansion walls, burn the cafe, turn my uncle's joy into ashes." But Allah's plan is always the strongest. That call was recorded. By morning, jail authorities had Ayan transferred to the highest security prison block. He now saw no way out. After Ayan's transfer, a strange calm descended upon the Haveli. Nawal sometimes found herself reflecting on childhood memories. Her mother had died young. Her father was emotionally distant, but he had always tried to provide an education for her. As a child, she walked every day to the village's old school. There, a teacher named Sakina would often place a hand on her head and say, "Daughter, knowledge teaches a woman how to stand on her own feet. Never treat it as a burden." Perhaps that's why, when widowhood struck, Nawal didn't beg or break. She simply found a way to earn her livelihood. She had always vowed never to stretch her hand before anyone. One evening, she shared that very story with Dilshad. He replied gently, "That's what drew me to you. I saw in you the courage to stand tall even after fate tried to bring you down." Nawal smiled and closed her fist. "I had made up my mind. If I can earn honestly, then I'll move forward no matter what the world says." Dilshad, in return, would sometimes share tales from his own childhood. His grandfather, Nawab Mehak Khan, had been a respected landlord, but one with a deeply humane heart. He cared for his farmers, protected them from debt and cruelty. When Dilshad announced his plan to attend business school, many had mocked him. What can a landlord's son learn about business? But Dilshad had always believed in balancing tradition with progress. He built a small library inside the Haveli, collecting books on history, literature, and Sufism. When his wife died from cancer, something in him broke. His sons had long since gone to Dubai for work, and in that sprawling, silent mansion, he was left completely alone. He tried to distract himself with routine, but nothing could fill the void. Then one day, he saw Nawal, and in her eyes, he saw a hope that might finally heal that emptiness. Nawal often wondered whether the entire village had grown narrow-minded or whether she had simply become their target. She knew well that most of them held no personal grudge. It was just the backward thinking and false pride of rural tradition, that a widow seen with a rich man must be scandalous. But time had proven otherwise. People now understood that Nawal's courage and truth had crushed Ayan's wicked schemes. Gradually, the village's sympathy began to shift in her favor. And now, as the cold December mornings arrived, Nawal's delivery date was drawing near. When the white winter sunlight touched the vast courtyard of the Haveli, Nawal would sit in a chair, gazing at the mango trees. Sometimes Rahil's memory would drift into her thoughts. Other times, she would recall Dilshad's unwavering kindness. She would often place her hand gently over her belly and whisper a prayer, "Ya Rab, make this life easy. Shower your mercy upon the soul that's about to arrive." During this time, Dilshad became more attentive than ever. He handed over all household duties to the servants and Nazir, choosing instead to spend his time beside Nawal. Some days, he'd bring a book and read aloud to her. Other nights, he'd play soft melodies on the sitar. Nawal's heart found peace. This man truly understood her sorrow. Then came the night when Nawal began to feel labor pains. By morning, her condition had worsened. Dilshad quickly brought out the jeep to head to the city hospital, taking postman Anwar and servant Bano with him, just in case help was needed along the way. As the jeep approached the old bridge over the river, they found the road blocked. Workers were repairing the planks. A laborer signaled with his hand they would have to wait 5 minutes. Dilshad's heart sank like lightning had struck. Pain was etched across Nawal's face. In a faint voice, she said, "Remember, this is where your Jeep first got a flat tire." Dilshad took a deep breath and held her hand. Same bridge, same us. But the path has changed now. No one can stop us anymore, inshallah. 5 minutes later, the way was cleared. Dilshad sped ahead. At the hospital, doctors immediately admitted Nawal to the maternity ward. The whole day passed in anguish and prayer. Finally, at dusk, Nawal gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. When Dilshad held the tiny soul in his arms for the first time, silent tears streamed down his cheeks. He whispered the Adhan in her ear and said with love, "Our Rahat has arrived." With a tired smile, Nawal asked, "Are you happy?" Dilshad replied, "Every prayer I've ever made was answered today." A few weeks later, a celebration was held at the Haveli for the newborns, Akaika. People came from every home in the village. Even Bibi Hasina arrived, showering rose petals and embracing Nawal. "Daughter," she said warmly, "you've brought the fragrance of your old tea shop into this entire Haveli. May God bless your family with a noble fate." Nawal humbly responded, "Maji, fragrance is Allah's mercy. We're just the vessels that carry it." Hasina wiped her tears and blessed her with heartfelt du'as. The celebration lasted late into the night. Once the guests departed, a magical silence filled the courtyard. The stars above twinkled like whispers of joy. Nawal walked slowly in the veranda, rocking baby Rahat in her arms, singing a soft lullaby under her breath. Under the mango tree, Dilshad sat puffing on his hookah. When he saw her coming, he quietly set it aside and said, "All my life I gathered wealth, but peace never came. You've taught me that peace lies in kissing a forehead, in hugging a weeping soul, and in standing firmly for the truth." Nawal smiled gently and replied, "And you've taught me that love shares dignity, not riches." Just then, a shooting star streaked across the sky. In the same breath, they both made a wish from their hearts that no more conspiracies, no more poison, no more separation ever enter their world again. Nawal closed her eyes, and in that still moment, it felt as if Rahil's soul, smiling from afar, softly whispered, "Amin." Just as everything began to feel calm again, rumors started swirling across the village that Ayan might be released soon. Some said he had reached out to someone with political influence in the city, trying to secure his freedom. When Nawal and Dilshad heard the news, a flicker of unease stirred within them. Dilshad gently reassured her, "The law and time are now on our side, don't worry." But a wave of fear crept back into Nawal's mind. Sleepless nights followed. She would lie awake, holding her daughter close, thinking of all the pain she had already endured, and how she couldn't bear to go through it again. Dilshad, however, did not lose hope. He used his contacts to verify the facts. The truth was that Ayaan's case had weakened due to the strength of evidence. His chances of release were next to none. Dilshad assured Nawal, "Don't be afraid, every trap Ayaan set will collapse on him." Nawal took a deep breath and thanked Allah from her heart. One day, while searching the storage room for old utensils, Nawal stumbled upon another dusty box. Inside were Rahil's old photographs, a few books, and a draft of a letter. It had no date, but the words were clear. "Brother Dilshad, ever since I first saw Nawal, I felt certain that my life would become complete. If anything ever happens to me, please look after her." Nawal held the box to her eyes like coal and showed it to Dilshad. With tears in his eyes, Dilshad said, "Rahil was my friend from university. I remember when he first spoke about you. I hadn't even seen you yet, but I prayed for your happiness. I never imagined fate would one day bring us together like this." In a heavy tone, Nawal replied, "We don't understand Allah's wisdom, but we must always trust that He never abandons His servants." Time moved on, and Rahat Cafe became increasingly popular in the village and surrounding areas. People no longer saw it as just a place to drink tea. It became a peaceful retreat. Nawal and Dilshad would sometimes sit there together. Nawal added artistic touches with her own hands, arranging antique utensils, decorating walls with rural patterns and literary quotes. Bano would serve tea with a cheerful smile. Even Nazir occasionally helped out. The cafe soon became a symbol of Nawal's resilience. The villagers, once rigid in their thinking, began to evolve. Those who once saw Nawal as a weak, widowed woman now admired her as a strong, dignified figure who had rebuilt her life with her own hands. Dilshad, too, took more steps to help the town grow. He helped establish a small school that offered education beyond primary level to the village children. He introduced modern farming techniques in his orchard and distributed seeds to local farmers, without interest. Witnessing all this, the villagers came to see Dilshad not just as a wealthy landlord, but as someone who genuinely cared for their well-being. Young farmers joined him, and the signs of a new dawn in Mehakpur grew stronger. When Nawal's daughter, Rahat, turned 1, a small celebration was held in the Haveli. Nawal prepared sweetwater chestnuts with her own hands, arranged a modest cake, and invited a few close villagers. As the children played joyfully in the courtyard, Nawal couldn't help but remember the sorrowful parts of her past. She thought of how long the journey of life truly is, one in which both joy and sorrow are inevitable companions. There was a time she stood at her street cart, hiding her tears as a widow, and today she was the mother of an innocent little girl, with Dilshad as a strong shelter at her side. That night, after the celebration, Nawal said to Dilshad, "Sometimes I wonder, if I had lost hope back then, I might never have been blessed with all this." Dilshad placed his hand over hers and replied, "Allah saw your intention. You made hard work your identity. That's why you were chosen to witness this day." That year, the monsoon arrived with unusual intensity. A branch of the Indus River, flowing near the village, was at risk of breaching its embankment. The water level around Mehakpur was rising rapidly. The villagers grew anxious. If the embankment gave way, a great disaster could unfold. Dilshad immediately called an emergency meeting. He reached out to his connections, local politicians and officials, to request reinforcement of the dam to protect Mehakpur. Some skeptics muttered, "It's not easy to convince city officials. Who listens to poor villagers?" But Dilshad, with firm resolve, replied, "Nothing is impossible when we stand together. I'll go work on the embankment myself." Nawal tried to stop him, saying his health wasn't strong enough. But Dilshad smiled and said, "This is my village. I owe it a debt I must repay." Under the blazing afternoon sun, Dilshad joined his workers and a few farmers at the dam. When people saw him digging with a pickaxe, their spirits lifted. The entire village mobilized. Together, they strengthened the barrier. The floodwaters were diverted just enough to save the town. That evening, Nawal offered special prayers of gratitude, for a great calamity had been averted. Soon after, the final court verdict arrived. Ayan was found guilty on all counts, conspiring to seize property, orchestrating attacks, and using criminal elements. He was sentenced to long-term imprisonment. The village breathed a collective sigh of relief. In her heart, Nawal thought, revenge may achieve little, but justice is essential to uphold peace. Time moved forward. Nawal continued managing the cafe, Dilshad remained busy with his lands and social efforts, and together they found joy in raising their daughter, Rahat. One day, Nawal visited her old hut, the place where her street stall once stood. She cleaned it thoroughly. Standing near the cracked tandoor, she thought of Rahil. In the scent of the soil, she could still sense his presence. Softly, she whispered, "Rahil, every time I laid soil on your grave, I prayed Allah would never break me again. Today, I found new support. Your friend. I haven't forgotten you, but life has taught me to move forward." Her heart ached, but no tears came. Only a strange peace settled over her soul. She felt Rahil's spirit would be pleased, that his wife had found a better fate. As she turned to leave, she felt certain no night would bring a fear again. The darkness over Mehakpur no longer brought dread, only a hint of calm. Each evening after the cafe closed, Nawal and Dilshad would sit in the courtyard of the Haveli. Amid the rustling mango trees, they would feel the whisper of divine mercy. Sometimes, Nawal held Rahil's diary in her hands, glancing between the stars and Dilshad. He would murmur softly, "It took so many trials to reach here, but the peace we have now heals every scar." Nawal would reply, "I believe the prayers we whispered over our wounds have now rippled into the entire universe." There was a new fragrance in the air, not of parathas or sweet chestnuts, but of loyalty and resilience. The people of Mehakpur had seen how love, dignity, and honest earnings could lift a widow into a palace and rekindle life in the heart of an aging landlord. The old fort, abandoned for a decade, now seemed reborn. The mango trees bore fruit. The corridors were once again filled with people, Light brought back liveliness. The quiet grace of Dilshad and Nawal infused the space with meaningful tranquility. Now, even when dark clouds gathered over Mehakpur, they carried not fear, but hope that rain would come as a blessing. Rahat's innocent laughter echoed in the alleys, reminding people that a new era had begun. Bibi Hasina would often say, "Once, this village was only known for its soil and poverty. Now, stories of courage and love breathe through its streets." And on that night, as Dilshad and Nawal held their daughter close and gazed at the sky, it felt as though the stars themselves were carving a path for them. They knew then the real joy was never in wealth, it was in sharing pain, in holding on to truth, and never letting go of the thread of hope, even in the darkest of times.